All right, let's dive right into this explainer. You know, we so often look at our modern ecological crisis purely through the lens of, say, policy or new technology. But the sources we're unpacking today suggest something completely different. That the real root of the problem, and honestly, the ultimate solution, actually lies in a deep historical clash between Eastern and Western philosophies. It all comes down to how we fundamentally view the ground beneath our feet. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover two views of the Earth, move on to the Great Cultural Collision, then look at Western polarization in science, followed by Eastern polarization in yin-yang, and finally, we'll wrap up with a harmonious ecological solution. Starting off with Section 1, Two Views of the Earth. To really wrap our heads around our current environmental problems, we've got to travel way back and look at how human beings originally understood the Earth. Historically, the East viewed the Earth as this sacred, almost cult-like presence. It was worthy of worship, right? Deeply intertwined with human destiny. But the West? The West viewed the Earth fundamentally as just a physical, material existence. It was tangible, observable, and completely separate from the divine. You can really see the contrast in how these two worlds organized reality. The Western tradition relied heavily on Aristotle's ontology, basically the idea of tangible existence broken down into four elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. Meanwhile, the Eastern tradition used the correlative thought of yin-yang and the five elements. That's wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. In the East, Earth wasn't just dirt. It was this vital connective tissue holding everything, even heaven, together in perfect balance.
Moving on to Section 2, the Great Cultural Collision.
These two distinct worlds existed in parallel for a long time, but they were absolutely on a collision course. Back in the late 16th century, the Jesuit missionary Matteo Ricci actually introduced Western science and Aristotle's concepts to the East through his work Cosmic Ciliary. Fast forward to the mid-19th century, and this intellectual debate turns into a brutal geopolitical reality. The Beijing Treaty confirms the overwhelming material victory of the West, and in direct response to all of this, a thinker named Cho Jae-yu found his Dong Hak as an Eastern philosophical countermeasure.
I mean, try to imagine the psychological toll this took. For Eastern intellectuals watching China's devastating defeat in that Beijing Treaty, the sudden influx of Western material culture literally felt like, as they described it, the shock of the sky falling. Their whole sacred worldview was just completely turned upside down.
The cultural whiplash here was just incredibly intense. Famous writers like Lu Xun in his book The True Story of A-Q portrayed the Chinese people as being in this state of cultural schizophrenia. Their traditional beliefs were shattering. This triggered a frantic, urgent search for an East Asian self-sustaining modernity. They desperately needed a way to modernize without completely losing their soul to Western materialism. And that's where Dong Hak comes in as an incredible answer. It was a push for autonomous modernity. Basically, an indigenous, completely self-sustaining Eastern response initiated by Cho Jae-yu. The whole goal was to somehow harmonize their sacred traditions with these newly arriving secular, material realities. Which brings us to Section 3, Western Polarization and Science.
Now, while this massive collision was forcing the East to soul search, the West was going through its own radical internal transformation. First, immanent concepts started entering transcendent views of heaven. Then, as scientific development exploded, the focus shifted to a deeply atomistic worldview. Ultimately, nature was just reduced to simple matter. The beautiful mysteries of the Earth were stripped away, leaving just particles.
And this atomistic worldview? It massively expanded the separation between humans and nature. We essentially paved over the sacred to build our material world. It's exactly the kind of cold, concrete polarization we're so used to seeing in modern, industrialized cities today.
Now for Section 4, Eastern Polarization and Yin and Yang.
You might think the East just maintained its sacred balance while the West industrialized, right? Well, actually, no. The East experienced its own tragic polarization. They saw a rigid solidification of this idea that heaven is noble, earth is lowly. Yang became highly revered while yin became totally subordinate. It caused a complete, devastating separation of the concepts of heaven and earth. It's genuinely tragic to see how the element of earth degraded in their thought process. The original yin-yang earth was the central element seamlessly connecting heaven and earth. But the polarized version? Earth was substantiated merely as an independent physical entity. It totally lost that sacred connective power. Ultimately, the balance in the relationship between heaven and earth was completely lost. The crazy takeaway here is that both the East and the West, through entirely different historical paths, ended up at the exact same problematic destination. They both reduced the earth to mere substance and entirely lost their ecological balance.
Which leads us nicely into Section 5, a harmonious ecological solution.
We are facing a globally polarized relationship with the environment right now. But we must learn from this historical polarization of heaven-earth relations. The lesson is abundantly clear. Neither the purely material view of the West nor the rigidly hierarchical view of the East actually work for sustaining our planet. To fix this, we desperately need an integrated worldview, one that completely encompasses both the sacred and the secular.
This really brings it all together. As the research states, the harmonious integration of Eastern and Western cultures can be a clue to solving the modern ecological crisis and environmental problems. Healing our planet isn't just about carbon credits or the newest recycling tech. It requires a fundamental, philosophical integration of Eastern reverence and Western science.
It's an absolutely fascinating paradigm shift. By looking at how we lost our connection to the Earth, we find the exact tools we need to rebuild it. So I'll leave you with this. If we start seeing the Earth as a sacred system we are inherently a part of, if the Earth is more than just matter, how will you choose to step on it tomorrow? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I really hope it gives you a whole new perspective on the ground beneath your feet.